They had buried her alive beneath the Alpha King's castle. Not in a grave. In a cellar. A cold, forgotten room beneath Frostmere Fortress, where the walls sweated with winter moisture, and the only window had been sealed with stone decades ago. Elara had been given no food, no candle, no explanation beyond 3 cruel words from the guard who pushed her inside. Confess or starve. The heavy door slammed shut. The sound of the iron bolt sliding into place seemed louder than thunder. For a long time, Elara simply sat on the frozen floor, clutching the thin blanket they had thrown after her. Her lips were already turning pale from the cold. She knew why they had done this. She had discovered that Lord Varric was stealing grain from starving villages. She had refused to help him poison a wounded prisoner. And now he had accused her of stealing the king's silver seal. Nobody had listened. Nobody had cared. Above her, the castle continued to live as if she had never existed. But someone had noticed. Far above the cellar, the Alpha King's legendary white wolf suddenly lifted his head. Auren had never obeyed anyone except the king. He had never allowed a stranger to touch him. Yet that night, he refused his food. He ignored the guards. Then he began staring at the stone floor. A low growl rolled through the royal kennels. The handlers stepped away. Auren suddenly turned and ran. He tore through the fortress corridors, down ancient staircases, and into a forgotten wing where even the guards rarely went. Inside the cellar, Elara heard something approaching. At first, it sounded like footsteps. Then came the scratching. Claws against stone. Her heart began pounding. She pressed herself against the wall. Another growl shook the ceiling. Dust fell onto her hair. Then something slammed against the door. Once. The iron hinges screamed. Twice. The wood cracked. Elara covered her face. The third impact shattered the door completely. Cold moonlight flooded the cellar. And standing among the broken pieces was an enormous white wolf, his silver eyes fixed directly on her. Elara could barely breathe. The wolf slowly lowered his head. He did not bare his teeth. He did not attack. He walked toward her and gently pressed his nose against her trembling hand. Behind him, someone whispered in disbelief. The king's wolf. Elara looked past the creature. A tall man stood frozen in the doorway. The crown of Valedorn rested on his head. King Kaelen. And for the first time, the Alpha King saw the woman his own court had tried to erase. He saw her empty bowl, her shaking hands, the bruises around her wrists, and the wolf standing protectively between her and every man who had come to hurt her. Kaelen's face changed, because suddenly, the question was no longer whether Elara had stolen the royal seal. The question was much more frightening. Who had locked an innocent woman beneath his castle, and why had his wolf been the one to find her? Long before the cellar door was torn from its hinges, before the king's wolf became the most feared creature in Frostmere, and before King Kaelen learned that betrayal could hide beneath the finest clothes in his court, there was a young woman who had learned to survive by making herself small. Her name was Elara. She was 23 years old, an Omega without a powerful family, without a title, and without anyone waiting beyond the fortress gates to defend her. In Valedorn, that meant she had learned very early not to expect fairness. Frostmere Fortress stood high among the northern mountains, built from dark gray stone that seemed almost black beneath winter clouds. Its towers rose above pine forests and frozen valleys, their peaks often hidden by snow. During summer, the fortress looked magnificent. During winter, it looked like something carved from the mountain itself. Elara had lived there for 6 years. She worked wherever she was needed, sometimes in the kitchens, sometimes in the royal gardens, mostly in the stables. She preferred the stables. Animals did not care about rank. A horse did not care whether the hand feeding it belonged to a princess or a servant. A wounded hound did not ask whether its healer was an alpha or an omega. Animals simply knew who was gentle. That was why Elara had become strangely good with them. She could calm a frightened horse with a quiet touch. She could sit beside an injured fox until it stopped trembling. She could clean wounds from hunting dogs that had bitten 3 trained handlers before finally allowing her near them. But there was one animal in Frostmere that even Elara treated with caution.
Auren.
The Alpha King's wolf. He lived in a large stone enclosure beneath the northern tower, behind 2 iron gates and a wall high enough to keep ordinary wolves from jumping over it. Auren was enormous. His shoulders reached nearly to a man's waist. His fur was completely white except for a faint silver-gray patch along one side of his neck. A scar crossed his left shoulder from an old battle. His eyes were pale silver, and there was something unsettling about the way he watched people. He did not simply look. He studied. Soldiers avoided his gaze. Servants crossed the courtyard rather than walking too close to his enclosure. Even experienced hunters treated him with respect. Auren had fought beside King Kaelen during the Northern War. He had saved the king's life more than once. Some people said the wolf was bonded to the royal bloodline. Others said he was something older, something that had guarded Valedorn long before the first stone of Frostmere had been laid. Elara did not know what to believe. She only knew that Auren sometimes watched her. The first time she noticed it, she was carrying a bucket of water across the courtyard. Snow had begun falling. Auren was lying near the far wall of his enclosure. His head rested on his paws. His eyes followed her. Elara stopped. The wolf did not move. She looked around to see whether he was watching someone else. Nobody was nearby. She continued walking. The next day, it happened again. And the day after that. Eventually, Elara became accustomed to it. She never approached him. She never tried to touch him. She simply acknowledged him with a small nod whenever their eyes met. One evening, months before the cellar, she discovered that Auren was injured. The royal handlers were gathered around his enclosure. Auren was limping. The men backed away. The head handler cursed beneath his breath. Elara was carrying clean cloth toward the healer's room when she noticed. She stopped. The head handler saw her. Keep walking. Elara looked at the wolf. Auren's eyes met hers. He won't let you near him, the handler said. Elara did not answer. She placed the cloth down. Then she sat on the ground outside the enclosure. The handler stared at her. What are you doing? Elara simply remained there. She did not speak to Auren. She did not reach toward him. She did not even look directly at him for the first several minutes. She waited. Snow settled on her hair. The wind moved through the courtyard. One by one, the handlers left. They assumed she would eventually give up. She did not. Nearly an hour later, Auren stood. He walked toward the bars. Slowly. His limp was obvious. He stopped in front of her. Elara looked at his paw. May I? The wolf stared at her. Then he lowered his head. Elara's breath caught. She reached through the bars. Her fingers brushed the thick fur above his paw. Auren did not move. She carefully removed the thorn. The wolf flinched once, then became still. When she finished, she wrapped the paw with a clean strip of cloth. Auren lowered his head until his nose touched her wrist. Elara smiled. You're welcome. That was all. She stood and walked away. She never told anyone, but Auren remembered. And so did she. The winter that changed everything arrived early. By the first week of frostfall, snow covered the mountain roads. The eastern villages began sending requests for food. The fortress stores were supposed to be full. They were not. Elara noticed that before most people did. She worked in the kitchens and storage rooms, often enough to know how much grain should be available. Every few days, another wagon disappeared. The steward blamed broken roads. Then bandits. Then weather. But the numbers did not make sense. One afternoon, Elara was carrying sacks of barley toward the royal kitchens when she noticed several carts leaving through the eastern gate. The carts were loaded. The people around them were hungry. She stopped. One of the drivers looked away. Elara recognized the crest painted on the side. Lord Varric. She had heard his name often. Lord Varric was one of King Kaelen's senior advisors. He controlled several eastern estates and had recently taken responsibility for distributing winter supplies. He was a powerful man, older than the king, broad-shouldered, always perfectly dressed. His dark hair was beginning to turn gray at the temples, and he wore a silver ring bearing the crest of his family. People smiled around him, not because they liked him, because they feared him. Elara watched the carts disappear. That evening, she checked the storage records. 300 sacks of grain were missing. 300. Enough to feed several villages through the worst part of winter. She brought the records to the head steward. He barely looked at them. You counted wrong. I counted twice. Then count a third time. Elara held his gaze. Sir, the numbers are... He lowered his voice. Leave it alone. Something in his expression made her stop. He was afraid. That frightened her more than anger would have. The next morning, she was summoned to the eastern storehouse. Lord Varric was there. He stood beside a stack of grain sacks, speaking quietly with 2 guards. When he saw Elara, he smiled. You're observant. Elara said nothing. Varric approached. You've been looking at the inventory. Yes. Why? Because it is wrong. His smile disappeared. Inventories are sometimes wrong. Villages are starving. And the single word made her stomach tighten. Elara looked at him. They need the grain. Varric stepped closer. You are a servant. I know. You have no authority over royal stores. I know. Then you should also know that servants who interfere in matters above their station often lose their positions. Elara looked toward the grain sacks. Are you selling them? For a moment, there was complete silence. One of the guards looked away. Varric's eyes hardened. You should be careful. Elara felt fear, but she did not lower her gaze. If the villages don't receive those supplies, people will die. Varric leaned closer. Then perhaps you should learn that the lives of strangers are not your responsibility. Elara stepped backward. Kindness is everyone's responsibility. Varric smiled again. This time, there was nothing warm about it. That is a very dangerous belief. He walked away. Elara remained standing among the grain sacks. She did not know it yet, but that conversation had already sealed her fate. 2 days later, she was ordered to prepare medicine for wounded soldiers. A prisoner had been brought into the fortress. Elara saw him briefly. He was young, perhaps 20. His clothes were torn. Blood covered one side of his shirt. The guard said he was an enemy spy. But when Elara cleaned his wound, she noticed something. The cut was not from a weapon. It was a burn. A deep, circular burn on his shoulder. She had seen marks like that before. Poison. Not ordinary poison. A slow-burning substance that caused the skin to blister from within. Elara looked at the soldier. He was barely conscious. One guard stood nearby. Give him the medicine. Elara reached for the vial, then stopped. The liquid inside was wrong. She smelled it. Her blood went cold. Someone had added another substance. If she gave it to him, he would die. Don't. The guard frowned. What? This medicine is poisoned. The man's face changed. Elara looked toward the door. Lord Varric stood there. He had heard everything. He walked into the room. Leave us. The guards obeyed. Varric closed the door. Elara stepped away from the table. You knew. He said nothing. You wanted him dead. He is a traitor. Then let him face a trial. Varric's eyes became cold. You ask too many questions. Elara shook her head. You are stealing grain. Silence. You are poisoning prisoners. Varric took one slow step toward her. You have made a serious mistake. Elara's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. What mistake? By afternoon, Elara's room had been turned upside down. By sunset, the seal was found inside her linen chest. She stared at it. She had never seen it before. The guards grabbed her. No. Her voice shook. No, I didn't. The guard pulled her arms behind her. I didn't steal it. Nobody listened. She was dragged through the fortress corridors. Servants stepped aside. Some stared. Some looked away. One woman began crying when she saw Elara's bruised wrists. Elara searched the crowd for one familiar face. King Kaelen. He was nowhere. They took her to the council chamber. Lord Varric stood beside the empty place where the royal seal had been kept. He looked almost sad. Elara, he said quietly, why did you do this? She stared at him. You know I didn't. He shook his head. I gave you a chance to walk away. Her eyes widened. So this is punishment? Varric said nothing. A guard grabbed her again. Elara struggled. Please. The word echoed through the chamber. Nobody moved. That was the moment something inside her changed. She stopped begging. She stood still. Her breathing became slow. Her face became strangely calm. If they had already decided she was guilty, then nothing she said would matter. She looked directly at Varric. "You will answer for this." He smiled. "I don't think I will." They took her downstairs. The old cellar had not been used in years. The door was thick. The walls were damp. The air smelled of earth. A guard shoved her inside. Elara stumbled and caught herself against the wall. The blanket landed near her feet. Then the wooden bowl. The door began closing. She looked at the guard. "How long?" He shrugged. "Until you confess." "I have nothing to confess." The door slammed. The bolt slid into place. Elara stood alone. For a while, she could hear the guards laughing. Then their footsteps faded. She slowly sat down. Her fingers were shaking. She pressed them together. She would not cry. She would not give Varric that victory. She closed her eyes. She imagined the forest. She imagined her mother's cottage. She imagined Auren's silver eyes. Then she heard something beneath the floor. Scratch. She opened her eyes. Silence. Scratch. Her heartbeat quickened. She leaned closer to the stone. A low growl passed through it. Elara froze. Above her, something enormous was moving. Far away, a wolf was beginning to run. And for the first time in his life, Auren was not following the king. He was following her. The cellar wall trembled. Elara slowly stood. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then came the sound of claws scraping against stone. Closer, closer, closer. She backed away. The darkness seemed to hold its breath. And then something struck the door. Once. The entire room shook. Elara covered her head. A second impact split the ancient wood. The iron hinges screamed. And from somewhere beyond the door came a sound she would remember for the rest of her life. Auren's roar. The third blow never sounded like an animal. It sounded like the mountain itself had decided to break free. The door exploded inward. Moonlight flooded the cellar. Snow blew through the opening. And the enormous white wolf stood among the broken wood. His silver eyes found Elara. He lowered his head and walked toward her. Behind him, a man's voice whispered in disbelief. "The king's wolf." Elara looked past Auren. King Kaelen stood in the ruined doorway. His eyes moved from the wolf to Elara, to the empty bowl on the floor, then to the bruises around her wrists. His face became cold. Not toward her, toward the people who had done this. And somewhere deep inside Frostmere Fortress, Lord Varric realized something terrible. The woman he had tried to bury beneath the castle had just been found by the one creature in the kingdom he could never control. For several seconds, nobody moved. Snow drifted through the shattered doorway and settled across the cellar floor, bright beneath the pale moonlight. The broken door lay in pieces around Auren's enormous paws, one iron hinge still hanging from the wall. The wolf stood between Elara and everyone else, his white fur rising and falling with each slow breath. Elara could hear her own heartbeat. It was loud in the silence. Too loud. She looked at the creature standing before her and remembered the day she had pulled the thorn from his paw. She remembered the way he had lowered his head. She remembered the warmth of his fur beneath her fingers. But this was different. That wolf had been injured. This wolf looked like a storm. His silver eyes moved across the guards, stopping on each man for only a moment. Nobody dared step forward. Then Auren turned back toward Elara. His expression changed. The tension in his shoulders eased. He lowered his head until his nose was almost touching her hand. Elara hesitated. Her fingers trembled. Then she reached out. The wolf pressed his muzzle against her palm. Warm breath moved across her frozen skin. Elara's eyes filled with tears. Not because she was afraid. Because for the first time since the door had closed behind her, something had come looking. Someone had noticed she was gone. Auren remained beside her while King Kaelen stepped into the cellar. The king had seen many things during war. Burned villages. Dead soldiers. Children hiding beneath overturned carts. He had learned not to react to horror before understanding it, but the sight before him unsettled him more than any battlefield. An innocent woman was sitting on a frozen floor beneath his castle, wrapped in a blanket thin enough to see the stone through it. Her lips were pale, her cheeks were hollow, her wrists were bruised, and beside her was Auren. His wolf had ignored every command to return. He had crossed half the fortress to find her. Kaelen looked toward the guards. Who put her here? Nobody answered. His voice became quieter. Who? The captain swallowed. Lord Varric ordered it. Kaelen's jaw tightened. Did I? The captain looked down. No.
She almost laughed.
Almost. Instead, her voice came out weak. Then you should have known I was missing. The words landed harder than an accusation shouted across a room. Kaelen lowered his eyes. You are right. Auren moved closer to Elara. Kaelen noticed. He had known the wolf for most of his life. Auren did not trust easily. He certainly did not comfort strangers. Yet he was standing beside this woman as if protecting her were the only thing that mattered. Kaelen stood. Bring the healers. One guard hurried away. Another stepped toward Elara. Auren growled. The soldier froze. Kaelen lifted one hand. Do not touch her. The guard stopped. Bring a stretcher. Elara shook her head. I can walk. She tried to stand. Her knees folded beneath her. Auren immediately moved forward. His body caught her before she struck the floor. Kaelen's face tightened. She's been starved. No, Elara whispered. The king looked at her. She swallowed. They wanted me to confess. Kaelen stared at the empty bowl, then at the broken door, then back at her. Did you steal the seal?
No.
The answer came without hesitation. Kaelen nodded once. I believe you. Elara looked surprised. You do? I believe my wolf. Auren lifted his head. Kaelen looked at him. He has never brought me to the wrong person. The healers carried Elara upstairs. Auren followed. He refused to leave her side. The moment the guards tried to close the infirmary door, the wolf planted himself in front of it. Nobody argued. The fortress had learned something that night. Auren might be loyal to the king, but his loyalty had limits. And apparently Elara was now one of the things he intended to protect. The healer, an elderly woman named Mira, examined Elara carefully. She found dehydration, severe hunger, bruising around the wrists, a small cut above her eyebrow, several older injuries that had never been treated properly. Mira's expression changed as she worked. This was not one night. Kaelen stood near the window.
No.
Mira wrapped a warm cloth around Elara's hands. She has been without proper food for days. Kaelen's fingers tightened around the window frame. How long before she recovers? If she rests, perhaps weeks. Will she? Mira looked toward Auren. The wolf was lying beside the bed. He may make sure of it. For the first time that night, something almost resembling a smile touched Kaelen's face. Then Elara woke. Her eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above her was white. The room was warm. A fire burned in the stone hearth. For a moment, she did not understand where she was. Then she remembered. The cellar, the accusations, the door, the wolf. She tried to sit up. Mira immediately placed a hand against her shoulder. Slowly. Elara looked around. Auren was sleeping beside the bed. His head rested on his paws. Elara stared at him. He stayed. Mira smiled. He has not moved. Elara looked toward the window. Snow was falling outside. Where is the king? A voice answered from the corner. Here. Kaelen stepped into the firelight. Elara looked at him. He had removed his crown. His black hair was slightly disordered. He looked exhausted. Why are you still here? Kaelen paused. I wanted to know whether you would wake. Elara looked down. You don't have to. I know. The answer surprised her. He sat across from her. I am investigating what happened. Elara's fingers tightened around the blanket. Varric did it. I know. You don't. Kaelen frowned. I know enough to begin. He stole grain. Kaelen remained silent. He poisoned a prisoner. His expression changed. Tell me everything. Elara did. Not quickly. Not dramatically. She described the missing grain, the eastern carts, the conversation with Varric, the poison medicine, the royal seal. The cellar. Kaelen listened without interrupting. When she finished, the fire had burned lower. Auren opened his eyes. Kaelen looked at the wolf. Then at Elara. Why did you keep fighting? She looked confused. What? In the cellar. Elara looked down at her hands. I didn't know how long I would be there. Kaelen waited. She continued quietly. If I gave up, then he would have been right. Who? Varric. Her eyes moved toward the sleeping wolf. He wanted me to believe that being powerless meant being worthless. Kaelen said nothing. Elara looked at him. I couldn't let him take that too. Something shifted in the king's expression. Perhaps respect. Perhaps something deeper. He rose. Rest. He reached the door. Then stopped. Without turning, he said, No one will put you in that cellar again. Elara watched him leave. Auren lifted his head. She looked at the wolf. You really did tear the door down. Auren's ears moved. Elara smiled weakly. Thank you. The wolf closed his eyes. And for the first time in many days, Elara slept without fear. By morning, Frostmere Fortress had changed. Everyone knew. The servant accused of stealing the royal seal had been found starving beneath the castle. The king's wolf had destroyed the cellar door. And King Kaelen had personally ordered an investigation. Nobody knew what that investigation would uncover. But Lord Varric knew. He stood alone in his chambers, staring out through the narrow window. Snow covered the courtyard. Below, he could see Auren walking beside Kaelen. The wolf stopped, looked upward, directly toward Varric's window. Varric's stomach tightened. He stepped away from the glass. Auren could not possibly know. Animals did not understand politics. Did they? Varric turned toward his desk. There was a document lying there. An old document. Its edges were yellow. Its seal had been broken years ago. He opened it. At the top was an ancient symbol. A crescent. For claw marks around it. Varric stared at the symbol. Then he whispered a name. Elara. Mira saw the fear. No one is taking it. Elara looked at her. Promise. Mira nodded. I promise. Outside the room, Auren lay across the doorway. His head rested on his paws. Two young servants walked past and whispered. He hasn't left. Not since the cellar. Why her? Nobody knew. But Elara was beginning to wonder the same thing. That afternoon, Kaelen summoned the captain of the guard. The missing seal had been examined. The metal itself had been cleaned recently. Someone had handled it with gloves. There were no fingerprints. But the most important discovery was not on the seal. It was in the records. The seal had been used to open the royal archives 2 nights before it supposedly disappeared. Kaelen stared at the record. Who has access? The captain hesitated. The royal family. And the senior council. Who signed the archive request? The captain placed a document on the table.
Kaelen looked at it.
His face became still. The signature belonged to Lord Varric. But there was something else. The archive had contained documents from the reign of Kaelen's grandfather. Records about the royal bloodline. Records about the wolves. Records about an ancient order that had supposedly disappeared 3 generations ago. Kaelen looked up. Where are the records now? Missing. All of them. Almost all. Almost. The captain placed one final page on the table. It was found behind the archive shelves. Kaelen picked it up. The paper was old. The ink was faded. But one sentence remained readable. When the White Guardian chooses the Forgotten One, the throne must choose whether to protect her or destroy what she reveals. Kaelen read it twice. Then a third time. Auren entered the room. The wolf walked straight toward the document. He stopped beside the king's chair. His silver eyes remained fixed on the page. Kaelen looked at him. You know what this means. Auren gave no answer. Of course he couldn't. But the wolf turned. He walked toward the corridor. Then stopped. Looked back. And waited. Kaelen followed. The old cellar had been sealed after Elara's rescue. Nobody had entered since. Kaelen opened the door himself. The smell of damp stone rose from below. Auren descended first. Kaelen followed. The cellar looked smaller now that it was empty. The broken door lay against the wall. The empty bowl remained where Elara had dropped it. Kaelen stared at it. Something about that bowl disturbed him. Not because it was broken. Because it was small. Too small. It had never been intended to feed someone. It had been intended to keep someone alive just long enough to make them confess. Auren walked to the back wall. He sniffed the stones. Then scratched one.
Once. Twice.
Kaelen crouched. Here. The wolf scratched again. Kaelen called for the captain.
The stones were examined.
One section sounded hollow. A hammer struck it. The wall cracked. Behind the stone was a narrow space. Inside was a bundle of letters. Kaelen lifted them carefully. The handwriting was familiar. His mother's. He stared at the first page. His hands began to shake. She had died 12 years earlier. She had never spoken about the wolves. Never spoken about the ancient order. Never spoken about omegas. Yet the first line of her letter said, "If my son ever finds this, then the old bloodline has awakened again." Kaelen stopped breathing. Auren stood beside him. And somewhere above them, in the quiet eastern wing, Elara woke suddenly from a dream. She did not know why. She only knew that her heart was racing. And beneath the castle floor, the secrets that had been buried for generations had finally begun to rise. The letter trembled slightly between King Kaelen's fingers. For several moments, he could not bring himself to read beyond the first sentence. The cellar was silent except for the faint crackling of a torch mounted beside the broken doorway and the soft sound of Auren's breathing. Snow had begun falling harder outside, and every few seconds a gust of wind slipped through the shattered entrance, carrying icy air down the stone steps. Kaelen looked at the old handwriting again. He knew it. He had seen it on childhood letters, birthday notes, instructions left beside his breakfast, and the final message his mother had written before leaving for the northern healing house where she died. But this was different. This letter had been hidden. Hidden beneath the castle. Hidden behind a wall. Hidden from him. He unfolded it completely. The first page contained only a few lines. His mother wrote about the ancient guardians of Valedorn, about a bond older than the royal family itself, and about a white wolf that would one day choose someone the court would consider insignificant. Kaelen read slowly. The words seemed to grow heavier with every line. His mother had believed that the royal wolves were not simply companions to the Alpha Kings. They were guardians.
They watched the bloodline.
They sensed betrayal. And, according to the old records, every few generations a wolf would choose an omega from an ancient healer family. That omega would possess no extraordinary strength, no ability to command armies, no power to control wolves. Her gift was something much quieter. She could sense when something had been corrupted.
Poison.
False oaths. Forged seals. Certain forms of dark magic. The gift had once been used to protect the kingdom. Then people began to fear it. The noble families had discovered that a healer capable of recognizing lies was dangerous to anyone who lived by them. So the healer families were scattered. Their names were erased from royal records. Their children were hidden. And, eventually, the kingdom forgot they had ever existed. Kaelen lowered the letter. His eyes moved toward Auren. "You knew." The wolf stared at him. Kaelen almost smiled despite himself. "You knew before I did." Auren turned toward the cellar wall. Kaelen followed. There was something carved beneath the old stones. A crescent. For claw marks. The same symbol described in the letter. Kaelen touched it. The stone was cold. But beneath his fingertips, he felt a faint vibration. Auren's ears lifted. Then the wolf looked toward the staircase. Someone was coming. Kaelen extinguished the torch. The cellar fell into darkness. Footsteps approached.
Slow.
Careful. Two voices whispered above. "The king is still inside?" "I think so." "Then wait." Kaelen remained perfectly still. Auren lowered his head. The wolf's body became tense. The footsteps stopped. A moment later, they moved away. Kaelen waited until the sound disappeared. Then he relit the torch. His expression had changed. Someone was watching. Someone knew they had found the letters, and whoever it was had already begun to worry. Elara was awake when Kaelen returned. She sat beside the window wrapped in a wool cloak. The snow outside had turned the gardens white. Auren entered first. He crossed the room and rested his head against her hand. Elara smiled. "You came back." Kaelen stood behind him. "I did." Elara looked at his face. Something was different. What happened? Kaelen hesitated. He had commanded armies. He had faced enemy kings. But telling this woman what he had found somehow felt more difficult than any battle. There was a hidden room beneath the cellar. Elara's smile disappeared. "A hidden room?" He nodded. "We found letters." "From whom?" "My mother." Elara stared at him. Kaelen walked closer and placed the old pages on the table. Elara did not touch them. "Why would your mother hide letters beneath the cellar?" "I don't know yet." Auren suddenly lifted his head. His gaze moved toward Elara's neck. She noticed. "What?" Kaelen looked too. Elara touched the simple silver pendant hanging beneath her dress. She had worn it since childhood. It had belonged to her mother. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. "May I see it?" Elara hesitated, then removed the chain. She placed the pendant in his palm. It was small, an oval piece of silver. A crescent had been carved into the front. 4 tiny marks surrounded it. Kaelen looked at the symbol, then at the letter. His face went pale. "This is the same symbol." Elara stared at him. "My mother gave it to me. Did she ever tell you what it meant?"
No.
"Did she ever tell you where it came from?" Elara shook her head. "Only that I should never lose it." Kaelen looked at Auren. The wolf was watching the pendant. Then he looked at Elara. "You may have been carrying this secret your entire life." Elara's fingers closed around the pendant. "I don't want it." Kaelen understood immediately. He stepped back. "You don't have to." She looked at him. "Whatever this is, I don't want to become part of court politics." "You won't." "You can't promise that." Kaelen was silent. Elara's voice softened. "I was invisible before." She looked toward the castle. "I liked being invisible." Kaelen understood. For people born with power, being noticed was a privilege. For people without it, being noticed could be a sentence. He nodded. "Then I will make sure no one forces you into anything." Elara looked at him for a long moment. It was the first time she truly believed him. Not because he was the king, because he had given her something no powerful man had offered before.
A choice.
The next morning, Kaelen ordered the old castle historian to be brought to the eastern wing. Her name was Malin. She was 70 years old and had spent more than 50 years studying Valedorn's history. She arrived carrying 3 books and a wooden box filled with old maps. When she saw Elara's pendant, she stopped walking. Her face changed. "Where did you get that?" "My mother." Malin slowly sat down. She stared at the pendant as though it were a ghost. "I thought they were all gone." Kaelen looked at her. "Who?" Malin did not answer immediately. She opened one of her books. Its pages were fragile. She turned them carefully. Finally, she found a drawing. A woman stood beside a white wolf. Behind them was an alpha king. But the king was not standing above them. He was kneeling. Elara leaned closer. The woman in the drawing wore a pendant identical to hers. "What is this?" Malin whispered. "The first oath." She turned the page. The illustration showed 3 figures beneath a crescent moon.
The Alpha.
The wolf. The Omega. Malin explained that centuries ago, the first rulers of Valedorn had discovered that royal power alone could corrupt a kingdom. The Alpha bloodline needed a counterbalance. The wolves provided protection. The healers provided truth. And the king provided judgment. None was supposed to rule over the others. They were supposed to protect one another. But generations later, nobles began twisting the tradition. They wanted the wolves to serve the throne. They wanted the healers to serve the nobles. And eventually, the healer bloodline was hunted. Elara looked down at her pendant. "Why?" Malin's eyes softened. "Because people who can recognize poison are dangerous to those who live by it." The words stayed with Elara. She thought of the prisoner, the green flame, Varrock, the missing grain, the false seal. Suddenly, All the pieces began moving toward one another. Kaelen asked the question she was afraid to hear. Could Varric know about this? Malin's silence was answer enough. Lord Varric knew. He knew far more than they realized. That evening, he stood in a private room beneath his estate. A map covered the table. Several names had been crossed out. Several others circled. At the center was one name, Elara. Varric placed a small wooden box beside it. Inside the box was an old piece of parchment. It contained a record of her mother's family. The name had been almost erased. Almost. Varric had spent years searching for the last surviving member of the healer bloodline. He had believed the line had ended. Then Elara appeared, a poor Omega servant. No family, no title, no protection. Perfect. Until Auren chose her. Varric's plan had been simple. Destroy the old records.
Control the grain.
Remove anyone who could expose him. Then, when the winter worsened, he would convince the council that Kaelen was incapable of ruling. He would become regent, and eventually king. But Auren had changed everything. Varric stared at the map. The wolf had never chosen anyone like Elara in living memory. If the ancient prophecy was real, then Kaelen's throne was not his greatest obstacle. Elara was. Varric picked up a sealed letter. Find her mother, he whispered. One of his men frowned. She's dead. Then find where she lived. The man nodded. Varric looked toward the snowy mountains. And find out what she left behind. 2 days later, Elara returned to the servants' quarters. Not because Kaelen wanted her there. Because she asked. She did not want guards following her everywhere. She did not want people whispering when she entered a room. She wanted to feel normal again.
But normal had changed.
Servants stopped talking when she entered. Some smiled. Some bowed. Others looked frightened. One young kitchen girl approached her while she was carrying bread. Are you really the woman Auren chose? Elara laughed softly. I don't think wolves choose people like kings choose knights. The girl smiled. Then why did he save you? Elara looked toward the courtyard. Auren was lying beneath the covered walkway. I don't know. The girl whispered. My grandmother says white wolves only protect people who have never betrayed someone weaker than themselves. Elara looked at her. Your grandmother sounds wise. The girl nodded. She is. Then she ran back toward the kitchen. Elara watched her go. Something warm settled inside her. For the first time since the cellar, she realized something had changed. People were no longer looking at her as the accused servant. They were looking at her as someone who had survived. That afternoon, Kaelen found her in the stable. She was brushing a gray mare. You should be resting. Elara continued brushing. I have rested. For 2 days. That is enough. Kaelen smiled. You are stubborn. She glanced at him. So, I have been told. Auren entered behind him. The mare immediately became nervous. Elara placed a snow fell through the branches. A horse stamped nervously against the frozen ground. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called once, and then went quiet. Kaelen stared into the forest. His hand remained around the hilt of his sword. He had spent years learning to recognize an enemy. An enemy wore another kingdom's colors. An enemy crossed the border carrying weapons. An enemy declared war. But this was different. Someone had used the king's own banner to hide an attack. Someone inside Frostmere knew where Kaelen was traveling. Someone knew about Elara. And someone wanted her dead before she reached her mother's cottage. Kaelen finally turned. Captain. The captain stepped closer. Yes, your majesty. Search every man who traveled with us. The captain looked surprised. Every man. Everyone. Kaelen's voice was quiet. Until we know who sent those soldiers, nobody leaves this road. Elara stood beside her horse, staring at the unconscious attacker. She had seen death before, but this felt different. The man had not been trying to rob them. He had been waiting for her. She looked at the blood on the snow. Why would they be afraid of me? Kaelen looked at her. Because you may know something they don't want discovered. I don't know anything. Perhaps. His eyes moved toward the forest. But someone believes you do. Auren came back from the trees. His white fur was streaked with blood. Elara immediately moved toward him. Are you hurt? The wolf stood still. She searched his shoulder and front legs. There was a shallow cut near his ribs. Nothing serious. Elara placed her palm against his fur. Auren lowered his head. Kaelen watched them. There was something strangely peaceful about the moment. The forest had just witnessed violence. Yet the wolf seemed completely calm beside her. Elara whispered, "You saved me again." Auren's silver eyes remained on her. Kaelen looked away. For reasons he did not fully understand, seeing the wolf protect her stirred something in him. Not jealousy. Not exactly. Something closer to fear. Fear of losing someone he had only just begun to know. They continued toward the cottage. No one spoke much. The forest grew darker as evening approached. Finally, a small wooden house appeared between the trees. The roof was covered in snow. The chimney was broken. The windows were dark. Elara stopped her horse. She stared. She had not seen the house since she was 16. Memories returned before she could stop them. Her mother's hands kneading bread. A small fire burning in winter. Her father cutting wood outside. The smell of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. A childhood that had once seemed ordinary. Now it felt precious. Elara dismounted. She walked toward the door. The wood creaked beneath her hand. Inside, everything was covered in dust. A chair stood near the fireplace. A small table rested beside the window. A cracked cup remained on a shelf. Elara touched it. Her eyes filled with tears. Kaelen remained outside. He understood that some places belong to memories. Auren entered quietly. He sniffed the floor, then stopped. His attention moved toward the far wall. Elara noticed. What is it? Auren scratched the floor.
Once.
Twice. Elara frowned. She moved a small rug aside. There was a loose wooden board. She knelt. Her fingers slipped beneath the edge. The board lifted. Beneath it was a small metal box. Elara stared. I've never seen this. Kaelen stepped inside. The box was locked. Elara touched the pendant around her neck. The crescent seemed to fit into a small groove on the lid. Kaelen looked at her. Try it. She inserted the pendant. The lock clicked. The box opened. Inside was a folded piece of cloth, several dried herbs, and a second letter. Elara picked it up. The handwriting was her mother's. Her hands began trembling. She opened it. The letter was short. It warned her never to trust anyone who claimed that power was more important than mercy. It said that the pendant was not merely a family keepsake. It was a key. And if Auren ever came for her, she must follow him. Elara looked up. Her eyes met the wolf's. For the first time, she understood. Her mother had known. Not everything, but enough. She had known that one day the White Guardian might find her daughter. Kaelen read the final line over her shoulder. His face became serious. What does the key open? Elara shook her head. I don't know. Auren suddenly turned toward the mountains. A deep growl rolled through the cottage. Kaelen moved toward the window. What is it? Auren stared at the distant peaks. Then the wolf began scratching at the floor again. This time, beneath the board where the box had been hidden. Kaelen removed another plank. A narrow passage appeared beneath the house. Cold air rose from the darkness. Elara stared into it. There's a tunnel. Kaelen drew his sword. We don't know where it leads. Elara looked at the letter. Then at Auren. Her fear was obvious. But she stepped forward anyway. The tunnel descended beneath the mountain. The walls were carved from stone. Old markings covered them. Some had faded. Others were still clear. The same crescent and claw symbol appeared again and again. Elara ran her fingers across one. This is everywhere. Kaelen held the lantern higher. These tunnels may have been here before Frostmere was built. Auren moved ahead. His paws made almost no sound. Elara followed. The passage opened into a small chamber. At its center stood an ancient stone table. On the wall behind it was a painting. An Alpha King, a white wolf, and an Omega woman. Elara stared. The woman wore the same pendant. She stepped closer. There was something about the face. Something familiar. Not identical, but familiar. Kaelen saw it too. She looks like you. Elara swallowed. That's impossible. Perhaps. The king moved closer. At the bottom of the painting was an inscription. Malin had later translated it. But even before that, Kaelen recognized enough of the old language to understand the first line. The wolf shall choose the heart that cannot be bought. Elara stared at Auren. The wolf was watching her. Then a sound echoed from the tunnel. Footsteps. Kaelen extinguished the lantern. They waited. Someone was coming. Auren growled. Kaelen pulled Elara behind him. The footsteps stopped. Then a man's voice echoed through the darkness. Your Majesty. Kaelen recognized it. Captain Darren. His own captain. Kaelen's expression hardened. How did you find us? Silence. Then Darren answered. We follow the attackers. Kaelen did not believe him. Come into the light. Darren stepped into the chamber. 2 soldiers followed.
Their swords were drawn.
Kaelen's hand moved toward his weapon. Lower your sword. Darren did not. Elara felt Auren shift beside her. The wolf's body became tense. Darren looked at Elara. You should never have opened the box.
Kaelen's face changed.
You knew about it. Darren smiled. I knew about the bloodline. Elara stepped backward. Who are you? Darren looked almost sad. I served your mother. Kaelen stared. What? Darren's eyes remained on Elara. Years ago, your mother tried to escape the court with you. Elara's breathing stopped. My mother? She knew they were hunting her family. Kaelen stepped forward. Who is they? Darren looked toward the symbol on the wall. The Old Council. Kaelen frowned. There is no Old Council. There is always a council. Darren smiled. Some councils simply stop appearing in official records. Auren growled. Darren glanced at him. Even the wolf knows. Kaelen raised his sword. Put your weapon down. Darren shook his head. I cannot. One of the soldiers moved. Auren lunged. Everything happened at once. Kaelen struck the first soldier. Elara stumbled backward. Darren rushed forward. The chamber erupted into chaos. Auren seized the second soldier's arm and threw him against the wall. Kaelen fought Darren. Steel struck stone. Elara crouched beside the table. Her hands shook. She saw something carved beneath it. A small symbol. She touched it. The stone shifted. A hidden compartment opened. Inside was a small vial. Elara smelled it. Her eyes widened.
Poison.
She looked toward Darren. He was holding a blade against Kaelen's shoulder. Elara grabbed the vial. Kaelen. He turned. She threw it. The glass struck Darren's hand. The vial shattered. The smell spread through the chamber. Darren stumbled backward. Auren attacked. But Kaelen shouted. Auren. The wolf stopped. Darren dropped his weapon. He stared at Elara. You have the gift. Elara did not understand. What gift? Darren smiled weakly. The one they were afraid of. Then he collapsed. They bound Darren and returned to Frostmere before dawn. He refused to speak during the journey. Kaelen said little. Elara rode beside him. She could feel the tension in his body. Finally she asked, Do you trust anyone? Kaelen looked at her. I thought I did. And now? He looked toward the fortress rising ahead. Now I think I have to earn everyone's trust again. Elara studied him. You didn't put me in that cellar.
No.
But you are the king. Kaelen understood. She was not blaming him. She was reminding him. Power carried responsibility even when the person holding it did not personally commit the crime. He nodded. Then I will do better. The answer stayed with her. When they returned, Malin examined the pendant. She was silent for a long time. Then she looked at Elara. You are the last. Elara's heart sank. The last what? the last known descendant of the Winter Healers. Kaelen looked toward her. Malin explained that the healers had once served as protectors of the royal line. Their gift was not magic in the way stories described it. They could not cast spells. They could not control minds. They simply noticed what others missed. A change in scent, a strange color, a false seal, a poisoned drink, a dishonest oath. Their instincts were unusually strong, and, because they could expose secrets, powerful people had hunted them. Elara thought of her life, her ability with animals, her instinct about the medicine, her suspicion about the grain. All the pieces fit. She looked down. I never asked for this. Malin touched her hand. Neither did your ancestors. Kaelen stepped forward. You don't have to become anything. Elara looked at him. Then why is everyone trying to make me something? Kaelen had no answer. Auren came to her side. Elara placed her hand on his head. The wolf closed his eyes. The following weeks changed Frostmere. Kaelen ordered grain stores opened. Villages received supplies. Investigators searched Varric's estates. They found hidden wagons, forged records, secret ledgers. But Varric was gone. He had disappeared before the investigators reached his estate. That frightened Kaelen more than if he had stayed. A man who believed himself untouchable did not run unless he knew something was coming. Meanwhile, Elara began helping in the healing rooms. She did not want a title. She did not want servants.
She simply wanted to help.
People began trusting her. A soldier brought his injured brother. A kitchen maid came with a feverish child. A farmer arrived with a poisoned horse. Elara helped them all. Auren remained nearby. The wolf became a familiar sight in the healing wing. Children who once feared him began leaving pieces of bread near the doorway. One little boy even placed a white flower between Auren's paws. The wolf stared at it, then gently moved his paw away. The boy laughed. Elara laughed too. Kaelen watched from across the courtyard. He had begun noticing small things. The way Elara smiled when she forgot someone was watching. The way she always checked the weakest animal first. The way she still startled when someone closed a door too loudly. The way Auren seemed to know when she was troubled before she said anything. And something else. Something Kaelen was not ready to name. One evening, Kaelen found Elara in the royal gardens. The moon was bright. Snow covered the stone paths. Auren lay beneath a tree. Elara was feeding birds from her palm. Kaelen stood beside her. You should be inside. You say that often. Because you never listen. She smiled. I notice. For a moment, they watched the birds. Then Kaelen said, when I was a child, my mother told me that a king should never be afraid of losing power. Elara looked at him. What should he fear? Becoming someone who needs power to feel important. She thought about that. Your mother sounds wise. She was. Silence returned. Then Elara asked softly, did she know my mother? Kaelen looked toward the mountains. I think they did. Elara's expression changed. Then perhaps my mother didn't die, by accident. Kaelen turned. The words hung between them. He had considered the possibility. But hearing Elara say it made it real. Why would someone kill her? Because she knew too much. Kaelen's jaw tightened. And if Varric knows? Elara looked toward Auren. The wolf had suddenly raised his head. He was staring toward the eastern tower. A bell rang.
Once. Twice.
Then soldiers began shouting. Kaelen turned toward the sound. The fortress gates were closing. Smoke rose from the lower courtyard. Someone had set the grain stores on fire. Kaelen drew his sword. Elara stood. Auren was already running. The castle erupted into chaos. And as Kaelen rushed toward the flames, a messenger came sprinting through the snow. His face was pale. Your Majesty. Kaelen stopped. What happened? The prisoner. Darren? The messenger nodded. He escaped. Kaelen's eyes narrowed.
How?
The man swallowed. Someone inside the guard opened his cell. Kaelen looked toward the burning courtyard, then toward the eastern tower, then toward Elara. The attack was not random. It was a distraction. Someone was coming for her. Auren returned and stood directly in front of Elara. his silver eyes fixed on the dark castle corridor. Then, from somewhere inside the fortress, came the sound of a woman screaming. Elara recognized the voice. Mira, the healer who had saved her life. Elara ran. Kaelen followed. Auren raced ahead. And before they reached the healing wing, every torch in the corridor went out at once. The darkness swallowed them. Then a voice whispered from somewhere ahead. Bring me the girl. Elara froze. Auren growled. And Kaelen realized that the enemy was no longer hiding outside the castle. They were already inside. The darkness inside Frostmere seemed to swallow every sound. For one terrible second, Elara could hear nothing except her own breathing. Then Auren growled. The sound rolled through the corridor so deeply that the stone beneath Elara's boots seemed to tremble. Kaelen moved in front of her. His sword was already drawn. Stay behind me. Elara's fingers tightened around the small pendant beneath her cloak. Somewhere ahead, a footstep scraped against stone. Then another. Kaelen raised one hand. The guards behind him stopped. Nobody moved. The corridor smelled of smoke. Something sharp lingered beneath it.
Oil.
Burning oil. And beneath both scents was something Elara recognized immediately. Bitter herbs. Poison. Her stomach tightened. They're near the healing room. Kaelen looked at her. How do you know? I can smell it. He did not question her. He simply nodded. Auren. The wolf moved forward. His white body disappeared into the darkness. For several seconds there was nothing. Then came a crash. A scream. The sound of something heavy striking a wall. Kaelen ran. Elara followed. They reached the healing room just as Auren emerged through the doorway. One man lay unconscious on the floor. Another was pressed against the wall beneath the wolf's enormous paws. But Mira was gone. Her medical table had been overturned. Glass bottles lay shattered across the floor. A window stood open. Snow blew through it. Elara rushed toward the opening. There were footprints outside. 3 sets. One was smaller. Someone had carried Mira. Kaelen knelt beside the window.
He looked down.
The drop was too far for anyone to survive. But a rope hung against the outer wall. They went down. Auren growled. Elara looked at the wolf. He was staring toward the eastern tower. Not the window. The tower. The tunnel, she whispered. Kaelen turned. What tunnel? The one beneath my mother's cottage. His expression hardened. How would they know about it? Elara touched her pendant. Maybe they don't. Auren suddenly ran. Kaelen followed. Elara ran behind them. They reached the old eastern corridor. At the end stood a forgotten stone door. It had not been opened in decades. Except now, fresh scratches marked the stone. Someone had entered recently. Kaelen pushed the door. It opened. Cold air rushed out. The passage descended into darkness. Auren disappeared down the stairs. Elara followed. Kaelen grabbed her arm. Wait. She looked at him. He saw the fear in her face. Not the fear of herself. Fear for Mira. She's alive, Elara said. You don't know that. I know. Kaelen released her. Then we bring her back. They descended together. The tunnel beneath Frostmere was older than the castle itself. The walls were covered in ancient markings. Some were carved into stone. Others had been painted with faded mineral dyes. White wolves. Silver moons. Women holding herbs. Kings kneeling beside them. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Elara's fingers began to ache. Kaelen noticed. He removed his cloak and placed it around her shoulders. You'll freeze. So will you. I have armor. You have metal. He almost smiled. Then I suppose I'm protected. Elara looked at him. The moment was small, almost peaceful. Then a cry echoed through the tunnel. Mira. Elara started running. Kaelen followed. Auren was already ahead. The passage opened into a wide underground chamber. Mira was tied to a stone chair. 3 armed men stood around her. And beside them stood Lord Varric. Elara stopped. For the first time, she saw the man without the mask of a nobleman. No smile. No polite expression. Only cold hatred. Varric looked at her. You have caused a great deal of trouble. Elara's voice shook. You burned the grain. Varric smiled. People are easier to control when they are hungry. Kaelen stepped forward. You have betrayed the crown. I served the crown. You murdered people. I removed obstacles. You imprisoned an innocent woman. Varric looked at Elara. She was never supposed to survive. Auren growled. Varric's eyes shifted toward him. That animal ruined everything. Kaelen raised his sword. Release Mira. Varric laughed. You still think you can order me around? He lifted one hand. Several hidden archers appeared along the upper walls. Kaelen's guards raised their weapons. Elara looked around. They were trapped. Varric walked toward her. Give me the pendant. Elara stepped backward.
No.
Your mother hid it from me for 20 years. Alara's heart stopped. You knew her. Varric smiled. I knew exactly who she was. Kaelen moved between them. What did you do to her? Varric looked amused. Your Majesty, you should ask your mother. Kaelen's face changed. My mother? Varric said nothing. Then Auren lunged. Everything exploded into motion. The archers fired. Kaelen raised his shield. Arrows struck stone. The guards rushed forward. Auren attacked the nearest soldier. Elara ran toward Mira. Varric grabbed her. His hand closed around her wrist. She fought. He dragged her toward a narrow doorway. Auren. The wolf turned. But 3 men blocked his path. Elara screamed. Kaelen saw her. He started toward them. Varric shoved Elara through the doorway. The stone door slammed shut. Kaelen struck it with his sword. Elara. No answer. Auren attacked the door.
Once. Twice.
The ancient stone did not move. Inside, Elara heard Varric's voice. Now you will finally learn why your mother died. The chamber beyond the door was narrow. A single torch burned on the wall. Varric dragged Elara down a staircase. She stumbled. He did not slow. Where are you taking me? You wanted answers.
His voice was calm.
I am giving them to you. They reached a vast underground hall. At its center stood an ancient archway. Beyond it was a mountain passage. Snow blew through the opening. Elara recognized the symbols. The crescent. The 4 claw marks. Her pendant grew warm against her chest. Varric noticed. Open it. Elara stared. I don't know how. You do.
No.
Varric seized her shoulder. Your mother knew. Elara looked at him. What did you do to her? Varric's expression hardened. She refused to help us. Us. He smiled. The old council. Elara felt a chill. Who are they? The families who truly ruled Valedorn before your king was born. He leaned closer. Kaelen sits on a throne because we allow him to. Elara shook her head. You are lying. Varric laughed. That is what your mother said. Elara's eyes filled with tears. What happened to her? Varric turned away. She escaped. Elara froze. She's alive?
No.
He looked back. Not anymore. The answer was almost casual. Elara's knees weakened. Her mother had been dead for years. But hearing this man's voice made the grief feel fresh. Varric pointed toward the arch. Open it. Elara looked at the pendant, then at the stone. She remembered her mother's final words. If Auren ever comes for you, follow him. She understood suddenly. The pendant was not meant to open the sanctuary alone. The wolf was part of the key. She smiled faintly. Varric frowned. What? Elara stepped backward. You made one mistake. What? You brought me here. Varric stared. Then he heard it. A sound behind them.
Claws. Slow.
Heavy. Scraping against stone. Varric's face changed. Auren had found them. The ancient door exploded inward. Auren charged into the chamber. Varric raised his sword. The wolf struck. Varric was thrown across the stone floor. Elara ran. Auren placed himself between her and the men. His body was bleeding from several small wounds. Elara touched his shoulder. You came. The wolf lowered his head. Kaelen appeared moments later. He was bleeding above one eyebrow. His sword was still in his hand. His eyes found Elara. For a moment, nothing else mattered. He crossed the chamber. Are you hurt? Elara shook her head.
No.
His hand briefly touched her face. Then he pulled away. Mira was brought into the chamber by the guards. She was alive.
Weak.
But alive. Elara rushed to her. Myra's eyes opened. You came. Elara smiled through tears. Of course. Varric tried to escape. Kaelen stopped him. The two men faced one another. Varric laughed. You still don't understand. Kaelen's sword pointed toward him. Then explain. The sanctuary. Varric gestured toward the archway. That place holds the truth about your bloodline. Kaelen looked at the ancient door. Then we'll find it. Varric smiled. You won't get there. He struck a hidden lever. The chamber shook. Stone began falling from the ceiling. Run. Kaelen grabbed Elara. Auren pushed through the falling debris. Everyone raced toward the sanctuary. Behind them, the passage collapsed. Varric disappeared beneath the falling stone. Nobody knew whether he was dead. The sanctuary opened beneath the mountain. It was enormous. Columns rose into darkness. Ancient murals covered the walls. At the center stood a circular pool of perfectly still water. Above it hung a stone carving of a white wolf. Elara walked slowly forward. Her pendant grew warmer. Auren moved beside her. Kaelen stood on her other side. The air smelled of pine, ash, and something ancient. Malin's translations had been correct. This was where the first oath had been made. Elara approached the pool. The water moved without being touched. Ripples spread across its surface. Then an image appeared. A woman. Her mother. Elara stopped breathing. The image showed her mother standing beside a white wolf. She was younger, healthy, holding a baby. Elara. A man stood nearby. Kaelen's father. Elara stared. Her mother's voice seemed to echo through the chamber. Not truly alive. A memory preserved by old magic. She spoke of danger, of the council, of Varric, of a prophecy. But the most important words were about Kaelen. She had believed that Kaelen could become a different kind of king, not because of his blood, because of his heart. Elara cried silently. Kaelen stood beside her. His eyes were fixed on the image of his father. His father had known. His mother had known. And both had hidden the truth from him. The image changed. A white wolf stood before a young alpha. The alpha knelt. Then an Omega woman placed her hand on the wolf's head. 3 figures. 1 oath. Elara finally understood. The wolves had never belonged to the kings. The kings had belonged to the oath. Kaelen whispered, all these years. Elara looked at him. Your family wasn't supposed to rule alone. He nodded. And someone has spent generations making sure we forgot. A sudden sound echoed behind them. Stone moved. Everyone turned. Varric emerged from the collapsed passage. Blood covered his face. But he was alive. In his hand was a torch. His eyes were fixed on the ancient records. If I cannot control the throne, he raised the torch. I will burn its history. He threw it. The ancient oil beneath the sanctuary floor caught fire. Flames raced across the stone. Mira screamed. Smoke filled the chamber. Auren lunged toward Varric. Kaelen grabbed him. Not yet. The wolf struggled. Elara looked around. The sanctuary was burning. Ancient records were beginning to disappear in the flames. And somewhere beyond the fire was the only evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy. Elara saw the records. She saw Kaelen. She saw Auren. Then she stepped into the fire. Kaelen shouted her name. She kept walking. Because for the first time in her life, Elara understood something. The woman who had once been locked in a cellar had spent her entire life believing survival was enough. Now she had something worth surviving for. She reached the ancient stone table. The flames closed around her. And behind her, Auren gave a roar that shook the entire mountain. The roar of Auren shook the sanctuary so violently that dust poured from the ancient ceiling. For one terrifying moment, Kaelen could see nothing through the smoke. The fire had spread across the stone floor, crawling toward the old wooden shelves where hundreds of years of records were stored. Flames climbed the pillars. Sparks drifted through the darkness like burning snow. And somewhere beyond the fire stood Elara. Kaelen's heart stopped. Elara. No answer. He stepped forward. Auren moved faster. The white wolf charged through the flames. Kaelen grabbed his sword and followed. Heat struck his face. His cloak caught fire near the shoulder. He tore it away and kept moving. Then he saw her. Elara was standing beside the ancient stone table. The records were stacked before her. Her hands were shaking. Her hair was covered with ash. A beam of burning wood had fallen between her and the exit. She looked trapped. But she wasn't looking at the flames. She was staring at something carved into the table. The pendant around her neck was glowing faintly. Auren reached her first. He pushed his body between Elara and the fire. She wrapped both arms around his neck. "I'm here." The wolf lowered himself.
Kaelen reached them.
"Are you hurt?"
No.
He looked at her face. There was a small burn along her cheek. Nothing serious, but the sight of it made something inside him snap. He turned toward Varric. The man stood on the other side of the sanctuary. He was smiling. "Look at you." Varric's voice echoed through the smoke. The great Alpha King, hiding behind an Omega. Kaelen raised his sword.
No.
He looked at Elara. "I'm standing beside her." Varric's smile disappeared. Kaelen stepped forward. "And that's what you never understood." Varric lifted his weapon. The final battle began. Varric attacked first. His sword came down with enough force to crack the stone beneath Kaelen's boots. Kaelen blocked. Steel screamed against steel. Varric fought like a man who had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Every strike carried years of anger. Every movement was designed to kill. Kaelen stepped backward. Varric pressed forward. "You were never supposed to be king." Kaelen blocked another strike. "You think I wanted this?" Varric laughed. "You were born into it." Kaelen's sword turned. He struck Varric's shoulder. The older man stumbled. "You inherited everything." Kaelen advanced. "You inherited nothing." Varric's eyes burned. "Exactly." He attacked again. This time Kaelen did not retreat. The two men fought through the smoke. Around them, the sanctuary continued burning. Elara tried to gather the records. There were too many. She could save only a handful. Then she remembered the stone table. The ancient inscription. The records were not the only proof. The sanctuary itself was the proof. If she could save the original oath, the kingdom would know the truth. She placed her pendant against the center of the table. Nothing happened. She pushed harder. Still nothing. Auren suddenly placed one enormous paw beside hers. The stone trembled. A soft light moved through the carved symbol. Elara gasped. The ancient walls began glowing. One symbol after another. The crescent. The four claws. The royal seal. Then words appeared across the stone. The original oath. Elara read them through the smoke. "No Alpha shall rule without mercy. No Omega shall kneel because of birth. No wolf shall belong to a crown. The three shall guard one another." Elara's eyes filled with tears. This was what Varric had tried to destroy. Not a weapon. Not treasure. A promise. A promise the kingdom had forgotten. She turned. "Kaelen." He looked toward her. She pointed to the wall. He saw the glowing words. His sword lowered. For one brief moment, he understood exactly what his mother had tried to protect. Then Varric attacked from behind. Auren moved. The wolf struck Varric's arm. The sword flew from his hand. Varric fell. Kaelen approached. Varric reached for a hidden dagger. Kaelen kicked it away. The villain stared up at him. "Kill me." Kaelen's face was hard.
No.
Varric laughed. "You think mercy makes you better than me?" Kaelen looked at the burning sanctuary. Then at Elara.
No. He shook his head.
"Mercy doesn't make me better." His voice became quieter. "What I do with power does." Varric's expression changed. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. The sanctuary began collapsing. Kaelen ordered everyone toward the exit. Mira supported one of the injured guards. Elara carried the ancient records. Auren walked beside her. Varric was dragged behind them. Stone fell from the ceiling. The passage shook. They reached the outer tunnel. Then the ceiling collapsed behind them. The sanctuary disappeared beneath rock. The fire was trapped below. Everyone stood in silence. Snow fell outside. Elara looked toward the mountain. The ancient place was gone. But the oath survived. She looked at the records in her arms. So did the truth. Kaelen came to her. You saved them. Elara shook her head. We saved them. He looked at Auren. The wolf's white fur was blackened with soot. Kaelen touched his head. You saved us too. Auren looked at him, then turned toward Elara. Kaelen smiled faintly. I suppose I should be used to that by now. Elara laughed softly. It was the first real laugh she had given since the cellar. The sound warmed the cold mountain air. They returned to Frostmere at dawn. The people gathered in the courtyard. Nobody had been told everything yet, but they saw the king returning with wounded soldiers. They saw Elara carrying ancient records. They saw Auren walking beside her. And they saw Varric in chains. A murmur moved through the crowd. Kaelen stopped at the center of the courtyard. He ordered the council to assemble. Every noble, every commander, every senior servant, everyone who had benefited from Varric's influence. They came. Nobody knew what to expect. Kaelen placed the ancient records on the table. Then he told them the truth. He spoke about the stolen grain, the false seal, the secret council, the healer bloodline, the ancient oath, the assassination attempt, the cellar, and Varric's crimes. No one interrupted. Some nobles looked at the floor. The king created a new council, not one made only of nobles. Farmers,
Healers,
soldiers, merchants, village elders, people who had never been invited into the castle before. Elara was offered a title. She refused the first one, then the second. Finally, Kaelen asked her what she actually wanted. She thought for a long time. I want to make sure no one in Valedorn is forgotten during winter. So Kaelen created a new position, Keeper of the Winter Hearth. Elara accepted. Her work took her through villages. She visited sick families, checked grain stores, helped organize shelters. She worked with healers. She listened. And wherever she went, Auren followed. The enormous white wolf became famous across the kingdom. Children no longer ran from him. They ran toward him. They left flowers, small pieces of bread, wooden toys. Once, a little girl placed a crown of flowers around his neck. Auren tolerated it for almost a minute. Then he shook his body. The flowers flew everywhere. The children laughed. Elara laughed with them. Kaelen watched from the steps. For the first time in years, the castle felt like a home. One evening, Elara stood beside the old cellar. The door was gone. The stone walls had been cleaned. Flowers grew along the entrance. She touched the wall. She remembered the darkness, the hunger, the fear, the sound of guards laughing outside. Then she remembered the sound that changed everything. Claws against stone. A growl beneath the floor. One enormous, white paw. She smiled. Auren approached. He lowered his head beside her hand. She touched his fur. You saved my life. The wolf blinked. She smiled. But I think you saved more than that. Auren rested his head against her shoulder. Elara closed her eyes. Behind them, footsteps approached.
Kaelen.
He stopped a few feet away. You always come here. Sometimes. Why? Elara looked at the open doorway. To remember. Kaelen nodded. Does it hurt? She thought about it. Sometimes. Then she smiled. But not the way it used to. Kaelen stood beside her. The evening sun touched the mountains. For a while, neither spoke. Then Kaelen said quietly, My mother was right about one thing. Elara looked at him. What? The kingdom didn't need a stronger king. He looked toward her. It needed people who remembered what strength was for. Elara smiled. And what is it for? Kaelen looked at Auren, then at the villages beyond the castle. Protecting what cannot protect itself. The answer stayed between them. Warm. Simple. True. That night, Kaelen and Elara traveled to the mountains. The ancient sanctuary was gone. But beneath the ruins, one small stone arch remained. Malin had discovered it weeks earlier. The original oath was carved there. Kaelen carried the royal seal. Elara carried her pendant. Auren walked between them. They stood beneath the arch. No nobles came. No soldiers. No crowd. Only the three who had been chosen by the old oath. Kaelen placed the royal seal on the stone. Elara placed her pendant beside it. Auren lowered his head. For a moment, nothing happened. Then moonlight touched the carvings. The crescent began to glow. The 4 claw marks followed. The ancient words became visible. Elara read them silently. The oath had never demanded obedience. It had demanded balance. The king would protect the people. The healer would protect the truth. The wolf would protect them both. Kaelen looked at Elara. Are you afraid? She smiled. Yes. He smiled back. So am I. Auren's tail moved gently through the snow. Elara placed her hand on Kaelen's. Neither spoke. They did not need to. The oath had been restored. Not through magic. Not through power. Through choice. Spring came quietly to Frostmere. Snow disappeared from the castle walls. Birds returned to the forests. The first flowers appeared along the mountain paths. The villages began rebuilding. And one morning, Elara walked through the courtyard carrying a basket of fresh bread. Children followed her. Auren walked beside them. Someone had placed another flower crown on his head. This time, he did not shake it off. Kaelen stood on the castle steps. He watched Elara approach. She stopped. A little boy ran forward and gave Auren a piece of bread. The wolf accepted it gently. The boy laughed. Elara looked up at Kaelen. Your wolf has become spoiled. Kaelen smiled. He was always spoiled. Auren looked at him, then at Elara. Elara laughed. The sound carried across the courtyard. Years earlier, she had entered Frostmere as a servant who knew how to disappear. She had been accused, humiliated, dragged beneath the castle, locked behind an iron door, left with hunger, darkness, and silence. Everyone who placed her there believed she had no power. They were right. She had no army, no title, no wealth, no sword. But they had misunderstood something much more important. Power was not always the ability to command. Sometimes it was the courage to remain kind when cruelty would have been easier. Sometimes it was refusing to betray another helpless person even when doing so cost everything. Sometimes it was reaching a trembling hand toward a wounded creature when everyone else had stepped away. And sometimes it was being seen. Auren had seen her. Before the king, before the nobles, before the kingdom. He had seen the woman hidden beneath the fear. The woman who would eventually help change an entire kingdom. Elara looked toward the old cellar. The doorway stood open beneath the morning sun. She walked over. From her basket, she took one small white flower. She placed it against the stone. Then she turned away. She did not look back. Auren followed. Kaelen waited for her. Together they walked toward the bright courtyard. Behind them, sunlight filled the place where darkness had once lived. And high above Frostmere, the first white wolf of spring appeared on the mountain ridge. For a moment, he stood against the blue sky, watching, guarding, remembering. Then he disappeared into the forest. And the kingdom of Valedorn finally understood the truth that had been forgotten for generations. The strongest person in the kingdom was not always the one sitting on the throne. Sometimes, it was the person who had survived the darkness and still chose to be kind.